3, 2, 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Nittany No Huddle Podcast.
We are the Nittany No Huddle Podcast. All right, welcome back. Today we are going to do the second part of the series. If you've seen the first video on why Penn State won't win the Big Ten or the college football playoff, this is the second part. This second video, why Penn State is going to win the Big Ten and we're going to be national champions this year. So I got Coach Devin here with me. We're going to kick this thing off. Starting big. All right. I lost my banner already. That's all right. Number one, Penn State has an elite defense and arguably the most elite defense. So, Devin, what are your thoughts on our defense and how it's going to translate to us winning the Big Ten and the college football playoff?
Yeah, I think our defense really is elite. I think we have one of the best defenses in all of college football, and the style that Manny Diaz plays is perfectly suited to play against some of these big teams like a Georgia. We'll see in a month here roughly about a month against Michigan. I think against even like a Alabama or a Texas or somebody like that. Our defense is set up really well to do that because we have elite pass rushers who get pressure on quarterbacks. We have outstanding linebackers who fly to the ball, who make plays, but can also drop back into coverage when needed. And we have the best secondary in all of college football. We have 7 legit DBs that can all play. So just to get some stats to back up some of that stuff, right now Penn State is ranked number 3rd overall in all of college football, allowing 2.3 yards per carry for opponents rushing. They're giving up 2.3 yards per carry. It's number 3 in the nation. And they're giving up 68 rushing yards per game. That's 4th best in all of college football. Now, obviously, Penn State has had not a phenomenal schedule. We can concede that. We can all agree with that. But you look at what West Virginia is doing. West Virginia might be the 3rd best team in the Big 12, which is absolutely bananas. Iowa might be the best team in the Big 10 West. And Delaware is going to fight for a playoff in, I know it's FCS, but I'm just saying that they're not this terrible team. So, yes, they struggle with Illinois and Northwestern, but I think defensively they just do some phenomenal things. They're right now ranked number 3 in the entire nation in sack percentage. They're getting a sack 11.9% of the time that an opponent steps back to pass. That's a pretty big number. 11.9% of the time that an opponent tries to pass it, Penn State gets a sack. And you brought up the stat in our UMass preview that 14 different players have recorded at least one sack, right? Or is it one TFL?
One full sack.
14 different players have at least one full sack. That number is crazy. So not only do we get turnovers, we're number 1 in the nation in turnover margin. We're number 5 in total takeovers per game. We don't commit, or let's look at penalties here. Penalties don't really affect us. We're doing a lot of really, really good things on defense. And you just look across the board and we can name countless number of players. But statistically, we have a top 5 defense in pretty much every category.
Mm-hmm.
And that's only going to get better as we focus in, right? Franklin and Zach always brings this up. Franklin is really big on depth. Like, let's build depth. Let's get guys playing time. As we get into these games that matter, we go from having 10 DBs playing down to 7. We go from having 13 defensive linemen checking into games down to 5 or 6, right? So those guys are going to be really ready to go. But the backups have experience in games and in minutes that matter, and that's only going to help us. So yeah, I think we have a great defense.
And to add to that, we are 5th in point differential too. I don't know if you said that. So we're plus 155 in point differential. Yeah. So I really do think our defense is one of the best in the country. And I am personally excited to see us play Ohio State and Michigan. Now, we are filming this the week before UMass, so we do have that next game coming up. But I think the defense is our way to the Big Ten title and our way into the national title. Because if you look at the rest of the teams out there, yes, there are the teams that play defense and have better stats, whatever you want to say. But if you look at the quality of, maybe not quality of opponents we played, but we have played, 2 Big Ten games now on the road, both on the road.
3 total, 2 on the road.
3 total, yep. Played Iowa, which terrible offense. We haven't really been tested with a great offense, which we might see. Maybe not great is the right word, but we will see a competent offense.
Explosive, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so moving on, point number 2. Aller is going to keep progressing, and I think that's going to be huge for us. You will see Drew Aller is going to make those strides, I believe. We're going to see him start throwing the ball deep. We're going to see him keep elevating his game. He hasn't thrown an interception yet. No turnovers for Drew Aller. That is massive. And I think you will see, in order for us to win the Big Ten in the college football playoff, you're going to see him keep progressing there as well. What are your thoughts on Aller progressing and getting better and better?
Yeah, I think that one of the hardest things as a young quarterback is being able to make progressions, go through your reads, and hit check down guys. I feel like that's something that so many young quarterbacks struggle with. They say, here's the route that's going to be open. This is the one I'm going to stare down, and then they make a bad play. Drew Aller does not do that. Drew Aller looks option 1, option 2, then throws the check down. Now, is he maybe too quick to go from 1 to 2 to 3? Maybe. I would say probably a little bit. But that's a skill that he will get better at as he gets more playing time. I mean, you look at his stats. He's completing 65% of his passes. That's a really good number for a first-year, 19-year-old kid. Sure, you would love it to be maybe a little bit higher, but 65% is really good. He has 9 touchdowns, and as you mentioned, still in his career, he has not thrown a single interception. He doesn't put the ball in bad positions. I think back to that West Virginia game. There was 2 balls. One was dropped, and one was not a good throw. But beyond that, I can't even think of a time this year that Drew Aller has thrown a pass where I'm like, oh, crap, that's getting picked off. I don't know. Can you think of any? I think of those 2 in West
I don't
Virginia
think he has.
So, yeah, do I want Drew Aller to take some shots and force it downfield? Yeah. But I don't know if we have the wide receiver pieces to do that. So, I don't think Drew Aller is the problem, and he will keep progressing. And the other thing that I think is super underrated about Drew Aller is his running ability. I mean, he's not lightning quick. He's not going to beat anybody in a speed race. But having that guy that you can go 4th and 1 Philadelphia Eagles butt push type situation, or, hey, it's 3rd and 2 from the 3. We need a 2-yard run right here. Okay, Drew Aller can get it because he's got that size and he's athletic enough. So I think that's super underrated about Drew Aller, and he's just going to keep getting better. I mean, every game I feel like I would say maybe he took a half a step back against Northwestern, maybe because he just didn't complete enough passes. But that was a really weird game anyways, and nobody really looked like they cared from Penn State. They were just kind of going through the motions. So he's going to keep getting better, and in 2 weeks against Ohio State, that's going to be the test. Is where is he at? Can he not turn the ball over in that game? Because if he doesn't turn it over, there's no reason to think we can't win that game. If he throws 2 or 3 picks, I mean, you think of last year, Penn State beats Ohio State if Clifford doesn't throw 2 picks, probably. I mean, if it's very close. So that's what I'll be looking for. I think he keeps progressing. I absolutely do.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Number 3, the running game will hit its stride. We have yet to see our running game be explosive, really take control of the game. I do think that is coming. And I'm hoping that it happens against Ohio State, which will be our 4th point. But I think we have the talent. It just hasn't happened yet. So I think with the running game hitting its final stride against Penn State or against Michigan and Ohio State, you have to run the ball. You have to be able to run the ball successfully. And I think we have the talent to do that. And I think Singleton is going to find his mojo back. Hopefully this UMass game provides that as well. But I think if the running game hits its stride, the college football playoff is not out of the question. And Devin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up there. I don't really have too much to add. It's just it almost feels like a sleeping lion ended. Like this running game, we know what Singleton and Allen and even Trey Potts, we know what these guys are capable of. They just haven't exploded yet. But still, despite that, we've nitpicked this running game a lot. We're still ranked 48th in the nation in rushing yards per game. That's in the top third. That's fine compared to where Penn State has been over the
Mhm.
year. For us to average 165 yards per game, 4 yards per carry, I really can't be too disappointed in that. Do I want Singleton to get a 60-yard run? Yeah, no duh. But the running game it needs one more step. It's solid, it's serviceable, but when it takes that next step, that opens up more things for Aller too, to go back to point two. As soon as that running game can get some explosive plays, now Aller probably
Play
has
action.
you get some play action, you get some crossing patterns, you get all these things available to you because the running game is better. And again, I think the running game has been serviceable and solid. It's coming. I really think it's coming. So
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 4. OSU is ripe for the picking. We saw them struggle with Maryland despite the final score. They struggled with Maryland. Maryland's a good team. I don't have anything against Maryland. I think they're a good team. But I think this year we can get Ohio State. It is a road game. It is big noon. We haven't looked good at noon road games, but I think this is it. I think this is the year we can have a definitive, hopefully not a close, super close game. Like if we could win this game by 10, I would be ecstatic. Obviously, anytime you can beat Ohio State, you're ecstatic. But
yeah.
if it's close, that's where we struggle. Close in late games with Ohio State, we have not been able to get over that hump. I think this is the year that it happens. What do you think with Ohio State?
Yeah, Ohio State's definitely beatable. You mentioned Maryland. Obviously, that Notre Dame game came down to the wire, and now there's some questions about Notre Dame. Is Louisville really good, or is Notre Dame not as good as we thought they were? But that's a game that they won because Notre Dame doesn't know how to count. I mean, you have 11 guys on the field, that changes. Does Ohio State still score? Probably because of the situation. But again, twice on that drive, Notre Dame dropped game-ending interceptions. Easily, Ohio State could have a loss right now. And even to backtrack farther, they opened the season against Indiana, and I think people are forgetting that was a one-score game in the fourth quarter
Mm-hmm.
against Indiana, who's not good. So everyone can say, and us as Penn State podcast can say, like, oh, Penn State struggled against Illinois, struggled against Northwestern. They still ended up winning by 30 points. Ohio State is very beatable. You look at some of their stats. Kyle McCord has been very solid this year, but he is not a prototypical Ohio State quarterback that they have had. And the numbers that he is putting up, although they're very good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I can't say that they're bad. They're all better than Drew Aller across the board. But he's not that quarterback that I feel like scares me the way that so many Ohio State quarterbacks in the past have. And then you look at their running game, and they're just, I feel like they're always dinged up and they're always hurt, and you can't really get a read on who's doing really well. Obviously, Travion Henderson's really good. Chip Trainum, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's really good. I mean, they have pieces. Marvin Harrison is probably the best wide receiver in college football, but he's dinged up a little bit too. This is a team that we can beat for sure. And you look at, just to throw a couple stats out there, Ohio State is ranked 77th in the nation in rushing yards per game, which I feel like we have always struggled to stop the run against Ohio State. So the fact that they're only averaging about 130 yards per game, that gives me hope. And then passing wise, yeah, they're ranked 21st in the nation, averaging about 290 passing yards per game. But I don't think they've played DBs like ours. I think we have better DBs than any team that they've played this year. So they're very, very beatable. And you look at their defense, Ohio State's defense is really, really good. I mean, there's no denying that, but they're still different than they have been. They're only getting so Penn State's number was 11.9. They're getting a sack every 12% of the time. Ohio State's getting one every 3% of the time. So they're not getting in the backfield the way they have in the past. Opponents are able to run a little bit against them. So they're beatable. They're very beatable. And honestly, Zach thinks that Penn State has to be 12-0. the way the Pac-12 and some of these teams, and I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, the way some of these teams are beating each other, if we beat Ohio State and lose to Michigan, I think that might be good enough to get us in. It just depends. So Ohio State is very beatable.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, next big game we got after, maybe not next big game, but the one we're all looking at, Michigan. We have them at home, which is a huge advantage. I know it's not the night game, but it's still a home game, and there's no reason we can't have a whiteout for a noon game, which I anticipate happening.
Correct.
Michigan looked really good this weekend, and it kind of threw me off a little bit because I haven't been super high on them. They took care of business this weekend. They looked legit, but I think we have the defense to compete with Michigan this year. It will come down to, can our offense score on them, and can our line block to give Aller enough time to make passes? And I think that's going to be the difference. I think we can, and I think obviously in order to win the Big Ten, you have to beat Michigan. That's kind of where it's at.
Yeah.
But I think we can do it this year. I think the gap between Michigan and us is, I'll say this, it's as small as it's been in the last 2 years, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I think we have a team that can compete with them. Our one downfall is our wide receivers, but if our running game is going, I think that can be the game changer for this Michigan game. And I think we can beat Michigan, and going on to the rest of the Big Ten, which is going to be point number 6. I don't have the banner for it, but number 6 is the Big Ten West is not good. And I think if we play the Big Ten West again in the Big Ten championship game, we'll take care of business. So, Devin, what do you think about that?
Yeah, Michigan's very beatable. Like you said, until this week, they have not shown fully what they're capable. I think this was the first time traveling to Minnesota where they really showed that they're still really, really good and they're still elite. But I don't think we're that far off. And you look, I think JJ McCarthy is probably the best quarterback in the Big Ten. However, he does make bad decisions every once in a while. And with the type of defense we play, we should be able to get turnovers against them. And playing at home, you get 1 or 2 turnovers, and that crowd is going to be electric. And that is something that Penn State thrives on, and they are very successful in home games. Blake Corum has not looked 100% yet this year. Well, he'll probably end up being 100% by the time Penn State plays him, and that's obviously a concern. But you look at his numbers, obviously in all blowouts. I mean, he's only rushed for 100 yards one time so far this season, and that was against Bowling Green, and he had 101. So, yes, I think he's still pretty injured, and I don't think he's quite what he was last year. But he is the person that scares me the most about Michigan, just because of how they block and how good of a running back he can be. And I'm not as worried about that as I have been, because I think our defensive line gets such good pressure. So Michigan's beatable, Ohio State's beatable, and like you said, to skip ahead to point 6, the Big Ten West is terrible. Whoever wins the Big Ten East wins the Big Ten. I think that's pretty much a given. Whether it ends up being Michigan, Ohio State, or hopefully Penn State, I don't see anybody in the Big Ten West that can beat one of those 3 teams on a neutral field for the championship. Now, can one of them beat one of them maybe in the regular season and cause an upset? I think that's more likely if they have a home game. But whoever wins the Big Ten East should win the Big Ten championship pretty easily. So getting past Michigan, getting past Ohio State, that sets up nicely for Penn State.
Yeah, and that brings me to point number 7. Looking at our games left, besides Michigan, Ohio State, Maryland might be the only test.
I would agree.
And, I don't know. I don't think, because who we have, Rutgers and Indiana and Maryland.
Correct, and Michigan State, which is in shambles. So
yeah.
At Maryland will certainly be tough, without a doubt, and it'll be hard to not look ahead, because that's the week before Michigan. It'll be hard to not look ahead for these young guys, especially if we beat Ohio State. and we're undefeated, it's going to be hard to not look ahead to Michigan when we play at Maryland, and that's a definition of a trap game right there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like the whole Michigan State little brothers quote. Like, Penn State just beats Maryland. They always do. So I think that if they just come to play, obviously I'm high on Maryland. I had them ranked in our polls way before the AP. AP never even had them ranked, and now they lost, so they're kind of screwed. But I think Maryland is a very solid team. But beyond that, I don't see any games on our schedule, to your point, that concern me. UMass is a W. Indiana is a W. Rutgers and Michigan State, the finish of the year, those are W's. So, again, we hate it, but it comes down to, can we beat Ohio State and Michigan? It would be nice, and obviously starting next year, that will change for sure with the inclusion of all these teams. But thinking about this year, it comes down to, out of these three teams, who can win twice? And that team's probably going to go to the college football playoffs. And they're going to be set up well, because I think Michigan is as strong as they were last year. Penn State is much better than they were last year, and they were good last year. And Ohio State maybe is a hair worse than last year, but still good. So, it sets up well for Penn State.
And that brings me to our final point. Yep. The rest of the country, the teams in the rest of the country have flaws. And I think of any year, there is no true dominant team. Like, yeah, you can say Georgia, but they haven't looked
at Georgia's schedule. Georgia, yeah. I mean, what was the South Carolina? They only beat by 10. Auburn, they beat by 7. UAB was let me pull it up here. I think it was a 7-point game at halftime.
Yeah.
It was 28-14 at halftime. UAB is awful. So Georgia, I would say, is the best team in the nation. And like you said, they are flawed. And you look at just going through the AP top 10, you got Georgia, who we just talked about, Michigan, who we just talked about, who have blown out every team they've played this year, but haven't really looked up to that caliber yet. Ohio State should probably already have a loss and has struggled in 2 other games. Florida State beats Clemson by 2, beats BC by 2, struggles with Virginia Tech. Then you get Oklahoma, who has looked pretty good at times, but they could have lost to Texas. I would say that the people behind Penn State are maybe the best teams, if you want to be crazy about it, like Washington and Oregon just blowing teams out. But the Pac-2 is so good that
they're going to eat each other alive.
They're going to eat each other alive. I don't think anybody comes out of the Pac-2 with undefeated. I think you're hoping, if you're Oregon or Washington, you are hoping to get through it at 11-1 instead of 10-2. So I think the Pac-12 cannibalizes itself. It loses. And when you look at the college football playoff, it's going to come down to Georgia is in, because Georgia's not going to lose until the SEC championship if they lose. So Georgia is in. The winner of the Big Ten is in. Florida State's probably in just because they shouldn't lose to anybody. And then it could come down to Oklahoma, Texas for spot number 4. And if that goes a certain way, maybe you're looking at 2 Big Ten teams. Obviously, Alabama will have something to say, but the fact they already have a loss, now you kind of hope that Georgia beats them moving forward in the SEC championship, so that Alabama can't get in with 2 losses.
It'd be great if Alabama drops another game.
It would be wonderful. So, like you said, the rest of the country has flaws. Nobody is elite this year. I don't think there's any team that you can say this team would win on a neutral site 99 out of 100 games.
Yeah.
I don't see that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why this could be our year. And I think it might be. I mean, if we take care of business, I don't see a team in that top 10 that we can't beat.
I agree.
But I think that's going to be about it. Do you want to say anything else before we wrap up here?
No, I mean,
it's not too crazy to think that this could be our season. It
right.
Really
obviously, the part of the point of this podcast is that we are homers and we're supporting Penn State, and we think that this could be our year. But if you really look at the cards on the table of some of the years that Penn State has had, this could be the year. They have a lot of weapons on offense and defense, and the rest of the country is at its worst. You don't have these dominant powerhouse 3 or 4 SEC teams that are just so good, plus Ohio State, plus Notre Dame, plus blah, blah, blah. Like, you don't have this year, where I think you have 8 or 9 really good teams, and it's just going to be how the cards shake out, who beats who. And there's no reason to think that Penn State can't be one of those teams. And once they get to the college football playoff, anything can happen. Just ask TCU last year. Nobody thought TCU was beating Michigan last year. Yeah, they got shellacked by Georgia, but they made it to the national championship game. So once you get there, anything can happen on a neutral site. And Penn State fans are going to travel, no doubt about that.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, wherever they play, if it's in the college football playoff, it's going to be a Penn State crowd without a doubt, and that always helps.
And pending we do win the Big Ten, we should be either first or second. So,
right.
I mean,
probably second. Georgia would probably still be one, but yeah.
Which they're not going to pick the Rose Bowl to go play at anyways.
Right.
So you're looking at a Rose Bowl game, hopefully not against a Pac-12 team.
Yeah.
But even so, I mean, you look at the Rose Bowl, we travel very well out there. So
for sure. Penn State fans are everywhere.
But I think that's going to about do it. This is why we are going to win the Big Ten and be national champions this year. And if we do make the college football playoff, you better believe this podcast will be there. So,
oh, yeah. Well, I'll take off work. I'll do anything I need to.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. We will be traveling for those games. So thanks for watching. I think that's all we got. Nittany No Huddle Nation out.
Thanks for watching the Nittany No Huddle podcast. Check us out on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Podcasts are posted weekly on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss one of our new shows.